Before we get started, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing.
In this video, we will take a look at how to create nice publication quality line graphs using Stata. And for the purposes of this video, I will be looking at the differences between employment rate for females in immigrants and domestic Canadian-born citizens. Alright, so let's get started. First of all, I'm going to clear the graph here that I have already produced so that I can start over. So I'm using Statistics Canada data, and I've taken data for employment and participation rates, and the data is differentiated for immigrants and Canadian born. So we can first take a look at the data quickly. Here we have status, we have education levels, we have their sex, male or female, we have time period, and then participation and employment. All right. So the first thing is we'll start over and we will set our working directory. We'll set the scheme to have consistent graphs, and then we'll import the data. I have the data in this Excel file that I have already imported. After I import the data, we can take a look at the data description. We can see we have these variables, and the variable labels, and the different types of the formats. So the first thing I do is I rename them so that they're easier to work with. So in this way, we can rename multiple variables altogether in Stata. So status, educational, participation, employment, and sex, these are the variable names that I want to replace. And then the second parentheses here has the name that I want them to replace with. Once I do it, it's done. Here we can see the code worked fine. Now we want to plot employment for females for all education levels. And so here we want to create a connected line graph to plot the employment rates, and we want to use different line patterns and colors to differentiate between immigrant and Canadian-born females. So first we can clear out our graph memory by running graph drop all. Then we will use this two-way command. So it's two-way, and then in parentheses, you can see we have this whole parenthesis. So this is one block of the code, which is doing connected for connected line graph, employment, and then period. Period is going to be our x-axis, employment is going to be our y-axis, and then we are using if condition if status is equals to immigrant and sex equals to females and education equals to total, and then the line pattern is going to be dashed, line color is going to be blue, and then the marker size is going to be 0.9. And then this is just a line break that's commented out so that the whole thing reads as a single code block. So the next code block is put together in another parentheses here, you can see. So it's the same command, but right now we are just filtering for Canadian when it comes to status, and then we are changing the line color to red, and everything else stays the same. And in this, this is our last code block for the last line graph. So here we are assigning that the label for the x-axis should start from 2006 and to 2022, and then every step size should be 2 units. And then we can assign the labels here. So within the legend command, we can assign label for the first graph to be immigrant, for the second one to be Canadian born, and X titles and Y titles, and we can give a graph name so that it will store it in the graph memory here. So once I run this code block, you can see that this has been generated. We have a nice red line connected with markers for Canadian borns and a blue line with green markers for immigrants, and this is for all females, and we can see the differences in their employment rates. Of course, not controlled for any covariates yet. All right, let's do the same exercise, but this time we will look at participation instead of employment levels. And so similarly, we will create another connected line graph for participation rate, and we'll use different line patterns and colors. So it's the same code format. We use a two-way command, and then we wrap in one parentheses the first line graph, and then in the second parentheses the second line graph. In the last line graph command, we are assigning the X label, which is this one here, and then we are giving the legends, X titles, and Y titles, and a name of the graph as G2. You can run this here, and the graph generates, and now we can see we have this G1 and G2. So these are the names that are assigned in the graph memory in Stata. So we can use these names to call the different graphs that we create and also export and save them. Anyway, so here is our graph for participation rate, and we can see participation rates graph. The slope is much stronger, much quickly rising compared to that of employment rates when we compare female immigrants versus Canadian-born females. So this is how we can create a nice clean publication quality graph, and in order to export these graphs, we can just run the graph export command right after we generate the graph. And we use the replace command in order to replace any earlier versions of the graph that there might have been in our folder.
If you like my videos and find them helpful, then please support my work by subscribing to the channel.